Did Richard Lovelady ever strike a Taylor Teagot? And who had more war, Jason Kendall or Russell Martin? What if Shohei Ohtani's dog was also a good lawyer? What would you do if Mike Trout just showed up in your foyer? Or is it foyer? Find out on Effectively Wild. Find out on Effectively Wild. Find out on Effectively Wild today.
Hello and welcome to episode 2364 of Effectively Wild, a FanGraphs baseball podcast brought to you by our Patreon supporters. I'm Meg Rowley of FanGraphs, and I am joined by Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer. Ben, how are you?
I'm not bad. How are you?
Not bad.
Not as good as the Bombers' bats, which were bombing on Tuesday when they hit 9 home runs against the Rays in the Yankees' own spring training park, of course, so they're familiar with the territory. But this tied a franchise record that the Yankees first set on March 29th when they beat up on the Brewers 20-9, which was the origin story of the torpedo bats. Remember the torpedo bats?
I do.
I've hardly thought about them since then. But boy, they sure consumed some mind share at the time.
For a second, yeah.
Yeah. You were right about that being a fad. I don't know if it's a fad. I'm sure that there are still plenty of players using it.
Yeah,
but
I think so.
We just don't hear about it anymore. It's just a total nothing burger, basically.
Yeah, I mean, well, like, you know, the Brewers traded for Quinn Priester and then have been better, and so it hasn't been as dramatic, you know?
I know. Yeah, that's the other thing, is that we were all concerned about the Brewers pitching at the time, which seems like it's okay. I guess ultimately it rounded into form, but wasn't so good that first series, but boy, that just caused a firestorm of discourse and analysis.
Yes.
And it has quieted to such a degree that we just haven't brought up torpedo bats in, I don't know, months, essentially. So to the extent that they're still being used, they're just so not notable that they're a complete afterthought. So you were right.
Been an age.
Yeah, you thought at the time that players would experiment with them, that they'd try them, and then they would just recede into the background, much like axe bats or whatever other variety of bat that's slightly different from the standard bat model, but just doesn't really cause a stir. And that's exactly what happened.
Axe bats, man. I haven't thought about axe bats in a minute. I understand why people had a little bit of a, hey, what's going on there kind of reaction to it, because their performance in that stretch was dramatic. I think the part of it I found a little concerning was the swift turn toward conspiratorial thinking, where I was like, well, we can see them, though. We can see those bats are there for us to all see. You know, we can see them. I bet the office of the commissioner can see them. I bet it's fine. But I don't know. How many guys are currently using torpedo bats? Some number.
I have no idea. Yeah, because no one's writing about it or reporting on it anymore, really. For a while there, it was like we had a running tally of everyone who had a torpedo bat and who was ordering a torpedo bat and who had tried a torpedo bat and who said they weren't interested in trying a torpedo bat.
Right.
And now, who knows? I have no idea how many people are still using them.
Some guys probably, and other guys less so, you know?
Yeah, which was always sort of what it was bound to be. It wasn't really something that was designed to help every single player. But for a while there, it sure looked like the hot new thing. And now it's yesterday's news. It's March's news. And it really was just a perfect storm created by the circumstances of beginning of the season, Yankees just totally teeing off and having a historic performance. And some of those guys aren't even using torpedo bats anymore. They still hit 9 home runs, and they've had plenty of problems, and the Brewers have righted their pitching performance. And if it hadn't happened at that time to that team, then it probably never would have popped off the way that it did. It might have just been an undercurrent, maybe every now and then you'd notice. But people had been using them prior to the season and no one noticed or cared. So it was just a confluence of circumstances that caused that to be the biggest story in baseball for about a week. And then crickets.
Crickets, the Big Bang, sort of like that, you know, or like something crawling out of the primordial ooze, but not getting immediately eaten on shore, you know, something like that. It's sort of an ooze related situation if you think about it.
just very amusing. It just, it was a moment in time. It takes me back to March of 2025 or early April of 2025. We remember where we were. It's kind of like you remember some guys who have a really hot spring training, or maybe they start the season on a total tear and then it turns into a fluke or a mirage, and then they get cold again. But we remember when that guy started that season, just this torrid streak that was not sustained. And that was sort of true of torpedo bats on the whole. So
on the whole.
Hope we get some follow-up stories at the end of the season or something. I hope we get a tally, a percentage of players who ultimately did try them or use them or continue to use them now that it's not the cool new thing that everyone feels peer pressured to try anymore. There's no FOMO for torpedo bats, so only the true believers are probably still swinging them. So I'd like to see some reporting about just the how sticky they prove to be.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing because no one cares anymore, because it's clear you look at the offensive numbers and it was not a panacea. It was not a magic wand or bat or anything. It might help a little on the margins with some guys, and that's just not super exciting.
Well, I'm given to understand the bats are not sticky, Ben. I don't know if that would be.
Well, you put pine tar on them. I guess you can.
I do know that this weekend, if I remember the schedule correctly, that Dr. Alan Nathan is maybe going to offer some research on this question at Sabre Seminar. So I will make sure to be in the room for his session and see what conclusions he has drawn. But I don't think it has inspired much dialogue lately because, the effects were sort of explainable, or at least some of the contributing factors to that surge were explainable. And, we got distracted and busy with other things, as we so often do. So here we are.
Yeah. Two of those home runs were hit by Cody Bellinger, two of the ones this week. I mean, Cody Bellinger has had a heck of a season.
Yeah.
He has been the most valuable Yankee not named Aaron Judge. He's up to about 4 WAR by FanGraphs figuring, and he's done exactly what the Yankees hoped he would do. He's been a pretty good hitter. He's been in the lineup. He's been a pretty good defender. He's just, given them versatility and backup, and what a pickup that was.
Yeah.
I know that everyone is tarring and feathering Brian Cashman as usual, but that was a pretty slick trade, I would say, on his part to get Bellinger for nothing but money. And I mean, Cody Petit has not been any better than expected for Chicago. And Bellinger's making a reasonable amount of money for the production that he has supplied. That was just a nifty little pickup there, I think. And I remember saying at the time, and I know Joe Sheehan was writing at the time, that it seemed like a strange salary dump for the Cubs because they didn't need to trade Cody Bellinger. They picked up Kyle Tucker, and then they just felt moved to move Cody Bellinger. Yeah. And I get that there was some blockage and there were some positional log jams and they had some other guys at the positions that he played, but he plays enough positions that he seemed bound to be useful for them at some point. And they just gave him away. And maybe they said something to the effect of they would put that money toward something, but they didn't. They didn't really do anything significant after that, as I recall, in the offseason. And they didn't do anything particularly aggressive at the trade deadline either. So they just sort of gave away a perfectly fine Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, and now, they could really use him as Kyle Tucker goes through his pumpkin phase.
Yes, although they do have Owen Caissie, who's had himself a fine doubleheader sweep over the Brewers on Tuesday.
Yeah, had a good little run in his early big league career. It's nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
love this little 45-day warning time when the prospects come up and it doesn't cost them their rookie eligibility next year. And so we see Owen Caissie come up. We see Samuel Basayo, who we talked about last time. And we are seeing Bubba Chandler finally making his debut on Friday for the Pirates. And he's had to wait a while, and it seems like he's been frustrated by that, which I think he has acknowledged, and perhaps it has even affected his performance, some stagnation, just a little bit of upset about not getting called up sooner. And sometimes that does take a toll on a player's performance when they feel like, hey, I'm in AAA and I'm ready and I got the stats and I got the stuff. And now I'm just sort of marking time until the team will finally call me up. Sometimes that saps some motivation. So he's had sort of an up and down season after a hot start, but sort of excited to see him make his major league debut. Should be fun.
Do you find it odd? Well, I have to offer two things. So the first is that I think that depending on if he gets sent back down, I think that Owen Caissie will have enough time that he'll not be rookie eligible next year. Isn't that right?
Perhaps.
I think he's maybe a day over, if I remember correctly, because he came up on the 14th and the final game final day of the regular season will be the 28th of September. And I think that puts him right at 46 active roster days, assuming that he's up the entire time, which I guess they could send him back down, although they can't send him back down now. I don't know if you know this, but he helped them sweep the Brewers.
Sure did.
So anyway, I have to be a stickler about the active roster day thing because I feel like it feels like a Sisyphean task, to get people to think about that part. Not you, Ben. I know you were just forgetting what day he was called up.
Yes.
But other people, The September days count now.
It's hard to remember the minutia of roster rules.
I know.
It's a very inside baseball sicko sort of thing to retain.
It is. And you know what? It's no Wood's fault but the league's. And here, I don't mean to put anyone on blast, so I'm going to put the general entity of Major League Baseball on blast. They know, they know, and they won't tell everyone. They should just publish a list at the end of the year. And people said, I know it's hard. I have to count the days manually. You think that what you're doing is harder than what I'm doing? I think not. I think absolutely not. So it's no one's fault, but and someone knows because the pipeline account will be like, after the graduation of so-and-so, based on roster days, this person is under the top 30 of and so someone knows. Does a social media person know better than you? I think not. I'm only being a little bit serious, but I am being a little bit serious. So I don't, whoever listens to this at the league, they're like, oh, that Meg, she likes to joke. And I do, but I also want you to know that some of the best jokes have a seed of truth in them. That's what makes them good jokes.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been Meg stumping for just a little list at the end of every championship season being like, these guys are no longer prospect eligible. We know because we have to, I assume, Ben, sorry, I'm just doing a little rant and then we can talk about.
It's an important PSA/request.
It is important, and some of this information is available in the Stats API, and I want you all to know. I know, but here's the thing: you should still publish a little list, and I imagine you have to publish a little list because you have to tell your betting partners, "Hey, these guys graduated last year," so that they don't include them for Rookie of the Year votes because that happened one time. I think with Gabriel Moreno, it was definitely with a catcher where they were like, "He is eligible," and he wasn't eligible. He had graduated. He graduated based on roster days. And then they had to void bets. And I bet that was annoying. And I bet MGM was like, hey, we're the official gaming partner of Major League Baseball. Would have been nice to get a little list. This is me editorializing. I don't have a direct quote from anyone. I haven't talked to anybody at MGM. I don't think they want to talk to me. I have bad things to say about sports betting. But anyway, all of that to say that, sometimes we get this time where guys they've done all they can, they've done all they can at the highest level of the minors. They need to go prove it. Now, the part of this that I do find a little odd, and I agree with you that, maybe the issue is just a plateauing because of frustration, because of wanting to be promoted. Why am I not up there? I've done all of the things. I've pitched so many innings. Won't you please let me come pitch in the majors? But then am I right that I read they're going to use him in like a long relief role? They're not going to have him start?
Yeah, I think you're right that he's coming up Friday, but evidently beginning his career in the bullpen. Yeah,
I don't know about that.
It's not an unusual way to break in pitching prospect, but still.
So anyway, I'm confused about the Bubba of it all. Bubba Chandler. You're like combining two very common names, There's a proliferation of Bubbas. I feel like I'm putting Bubba Chandler, who I feel confident does not listen to our podcast, on the spot. Bubba, if you are listening, I'd like to know how you feel about this. Bubba is obviously not Bubba Chandler's like given name. That's not on his birth certificate. His name is Roy Reuben Chandler. He goes by Bubba. I don't know how I'd feel about being an adult called Bubba. You know, Bubba feels like feels like a baby's name. That feels like the name of not even a child, of a baby. I would feel more comfortable being like, Bubba. I'd feel weird calling a kid who like knows how to read Bubba. You know, it's not like a bad name. It's not like a mean name. I don't mean it like that, but it feels like a baby's name. It feels like a much younger human being's name. So that's why I would feel
a noise
weird.
that a baby would make. Maybe.
Yeah. Yes. That's why. Yes, this is why. You are absolutely right. Like a baby who is like pre-verbal but starting to do the thing where they like make sounds where you can tell they're like kind of starting to piece it together a little bit, where they're like, I know.
Babbling or
mama.
Bubba-ing.
Yeah. A bubba-ing. You could call it, you could tell me that pediatricians refer to that period of word verbalization as the Bubba phase, and I would believe you. Because it sounds like a sound they make.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to be a Bubba myself, but I enjoy a Bubba. I enjoy saying Bubba.
Look, Bubba's fun to say.
Yeah.
Part of it, too, is that it reminds me of gum. You know, it reminds me of gum and babies. Not the Friday show.
Yeah, not quite. Not yet.
Not quite.
Anyway, it's true. Bubba probably doesn't listen to Effectively Wild, but you never know.
You never know.
About to be teammate Paul Skeens has been on Effectively Wild, so for all we know,
true.
Bubba's listening, and if so, hello. And
hey,
sorry,
Bubba.
We sort of made fun of your name a little bit.
I think it's fine. I don't think it's like, I don't want to name other names that we've kind of made fun of, because then we'll be making fun of them again. Yeah. Some of those names were attached to children and people took exception to it. But I'm just saying that me personally, Meg, I'd feel weird being called Bubba.
Well, it would be weird if you were Bubba, probably. I mean, I don't know if that's... it's not typically a girl's nickname, but...
No, typically it's a name associated with a boy. A boy, a little boy or a baby.
I think of Bubba Gump. There are many, many big Bubbas out there anyway.
Yeah, like isn't there a gum? Isn't Bubba Yum a gum?
Mm-hmm. I forgot that the story, and there have been many big league Bubbas, even in some recent years. Of course, I remember Bubba Crosby and
many Bubbas.
Yeah, there have been some Bubbas going back a ways. It's a name with a tradition.
Totally.
So, yeah, it's a baseball nickname. Bubba.
It's a baseball nickname. It's a nickname. They're Bubbas.
Yeah, it's not an uncommon nickname. Yeah, there are many odder, more surprising names / nicknames out there, and we've remarked on some of them too.
I don't think it's odd. It's just it just reminds me of babies.
I forgot that the story with Caissie was that he was called up seemingly perhaps as a treat for him because the Cubs were in Toronto.
Right, he's Canadian.
And so they called him up to give him his debut in front of his hometown crowd, I suppose, right? So that was nice. And then he was robbed of a hit by Davis Schneider, which would have been a nice moment for him. So maybe that's why they called him up with one day to go before that soft deadline. And he's from Burlington, Canada, and maybe they will then demote him at some point. So that's
maybe,
but nonetheless, I guess that was a nice gesture. I also forgot something I saw the other day, which is maybe the final blow to, but not by the torpedo bat, which was when Miles Straw of the Blue Jays hit 2 home runs the other day. He switched from a torpedo bat to a standard traditional model and then hit the 2 homers and said he's probably not going back to the torpedo models. That was the nail in the coffin of the torpedo bat when Miles Straw decides that he can access his power better.
Poor Miles Straw.
With a standard bat. Yeah, that's the latest torpedo bat update that I actually saw, that Miles Straw has forsaken the torpedo. Anyway, we were talking about Cody Bellinger, and I was just celebrating his season. And I really think because even now it still seems like a little bit of a letdown. It's like this is his most valuable season, maybe. I mean, he had the bounce back 2 years ago with the Cubs. We'll see where he ends up. I guess he hit a little bit better that year. He might end up with more WAR depending on how he finishes the season. But it's a very solid season, and yet it still feels kind of like we anchored to 2019 Cody Bellinger and just remember him as a 23-year-old MVP who hit 47 homers and was like an 8-win player. It's tough to really effusively praise a 4-win season when you had an 8-win season at that stage in your career.
Right.
Plus, I guess as a rookie, he was a 4-WAR guy, but he hit 39 homers that year with a 138 WRC plus, and that was just 132 games, his first taste of the majors. So that plus then the MVP campaign a couple of years later, it felt like the sky was the limit for him. And I remember Sam writing an article for ESPN back then and basically saying, like, we should pay attention to Cody Bellinger because you never know. He might hit the most home runs ever. He might just be the best home run hitter ever. And that has turned out not to be the case, but it could have been the case. The fact that it was even conceivable at one time speaks to just how highly touted Cody Bellinger was. And then his career got confusing after that. And injury plagued, and he declined with the Dodgers, and he bottomed out with them in 2021, and then was also pretty bad in 2022, a bit of a bounce back. And then he just kind of got cast off, and the Cubs picked him up, and he had a bigger bounce back, but to a very good level as opposed to superstar level. And so that's what he sort of settled in at, or I guess he was that in 2023, and he is that this year with the sort of decent season in between. It's been hard to pin down what and who he is and what kind of player he is. And how much the decline was because of injuries and how much of it was because of mechanical changes precipitated by the injuries. So it's just a really hard career to sum up. And, you know, he just turned 30 like a month ago. So he's still got years ahead of him, but it's just hard to sort of sum up who he is as an almost 30-WAR career at this stage. It almost reminds me of Jason Hayward, who had a similarly sort of up and down career and was sort of disappointing because his rookie year was maybe his best offensive season, at least on a rate basis. And then he had that 27 home run year and never really came close to that before or since, and just sort of settled in as good defender, good base runner, good clubhouse guy who just never had the pop that it seemed like he might have at some point. And between the contract and the early promise, he was just kind of always disappointing. Like he's, you know, still bouncing around. He's been a big leaguer this year, but it felt like the promise was not fulfilled. And I kind of get that same sense about Cody Bellinger, even though he is the second best player on a presumptive playoff team this year, which is not nothing.
I feel like his career has contained, even within the seasons that have been so good, like all of this contrast, right? Because he was so good in that rookie campaign. You're right. He had a 4-1 season. And then do you remember that 2017 postseason where it was just like he could not lay off? He couldn't lay off like back foot breaking stuff at all. It was just like, you know, good luck, buddy. You're gonna flail at that. You're gonna swing through, and you're just gonna be toast. And so you were like, okay, he's good, but there was this obvious issue. But then, you know, the follow-up season wasn't bad, and then 2019 was so superlative, to your point, and then like 2020. So you like, once we got into 21, it was very arresting, where we maybe even as early as that offseason, we were like, okay, there's injury, but like, what's going on here? And then, you know, he gets into 22 and we're like, pretty early in that season, I feel like we started being like, is this guy going to be like a non-tender candidate? You know, like, is that where we're headed with this guy? So it's been a real peaks and valleys kind of time. And I don't know that I have really affixed my expectations to any particular peak or valley. I think that my main impression of Cody Bellinger's career has just been like, I don't know what to make of this guy. You know, like, I don't know where Cody Bellinger's like true talent lies in a way that is unusual for someone who's been in the league since 2017. Like I didn't even feel like, oh, well, just, you know, it's probably somewhere in the middle, like average was like, this is more of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of a guy, where there are going to be seasons where he is just like really on it. And then there are going to be years where you're like, oh, buddy, you know? And so I don't know. I don't feel like I still don't feel. And some of it is, how do I say this politely? Like, you know, a face that often is indecipherable in terms of an expression.
Yeah.
You know, like a man who looks like he's constantly staring out on the wonderment of the universe, perhaps.
Yes.
Aided by a little something. So I'm not saying that that is what's going on. I'm saying that's what the face looks like.
Yeah,
okay. Not that that's what the right.
The face
it's like
imparts.
a whoa.
Yes.
You know, he often seems like he's got like a whoa kind of going.
Yeah.
So there's that. Plus there's I see people still struggling with this, which is wild because he has been in the league since 2017. Part of it, I guess, is maybe like people still calling him Clay. Sometimes people call him Clay on accident.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he has probably surpassed Clay Bellinger in most people's eyes. Not mine.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, he still has a ways to go to overcome his father and the significance that his father has to me as a young Yankees fan and a person who got the autograph of Clay Bellinger and was like the first player autograph I ever got and cared about. So that was exciting.
I love that for you.
Yeah, former Effectively Wild guest, Clay Bellinger. Cody has not yet been on the podcast, so that's something he has not surpassed his father
knock
in.
Against him.
I know, yeah. And just the pure pennant to season ratio that Clay commanded, few have equaled. So it's it's a tough legacy to top, but he probably has in many people's minds, and he still has years to go. I think probably also the positional movement has something to do with how hard it has been to just clock him, because he's been primarily a first baseman some seasons, primarily a right fielder some seasons, primarily a center fielder some seasons. And he could do it all, which was a point in his favor, like being an excellent defensive center fielder. And then it felt almost like a waste to play him at first sometimes. But he's been pretty versatile and flexible when it comes to that, which is always nice. But I don't know that he's quite gotten the fame for that, say, Ben Zobrist did, or Chris Bryant for a while, or other Dodgers when they had their Team Pretzel situation. So I don't know. It's just a really fascinating career, and he's probably going to end up having been a very valuable, accomplished big leaguer, and yet he will probably be someone who's remembered as the guy who was Rookie of the Year and MVP in his third season and never quite returned to those heights. But they were very high heights, so he can still be a really good player despite being lower than those heights.
Sure. Yeah. And, funny too, because like been on important teams, right? Been on teams that are good in the modern era, and also teams that are just like historically important to baseball as an institution. And yet he can be kind of a cipher at times. Fascinating guy. Fascinating.
Yeah. Very much so. Okay. Yeah. Well, while we're on the subject of the Yankees, I wanted to ask you, okay, this is only partly about the Yankees. Which is the more embarrassing managerial misstep? And this is going to be Aaron Boone versus Craig Counsell of Cody Bellinger's former team, the Cubs. So managerial faux pas in the press with public comments.
Okay.
So Aaron Boone and Aaron Judge, the Aarons were a little bit at odds earlier this week because Boone made a comment when he was on sports radio, which is probably a mistake to start with. So he was on WFAN.
Yeah, automatically an error.
He was asked about he was asked about Aaron Judge and his timetable and when he'll be back in the field, because he's been DHing since his return in early August with the flexor strain in his elbow. He's been hitting better of late. So people are wondering when, if ever, he will be back in the field this season. So Boone said, I don't think we're going to see him throwing like he normally does at any point this year, but that's okay. We've got to feel like he can go out there and protect himself. And he said that there's no timetable on his return to the field. And as you heard, just discounted the possibility that he's going to be back to 100% throwing wise. So then the press goes to the other Aaron, and says, what do you think about this? And Aaron Judge says he feels way better than he did earlier this month when he couldn't throw the ball 60 feet. Now he can throw it 250 feet. And he said, I don't know why he said that. He hasn't seen me throw for the past 2 weeks, so I'm pretty confident I'll get back to 100%. So a little public call out by the captain there. Not just disputing what Boone said, but questioning why he would have said such a thing. And then, of course, everyone flocks back to the other Aaron. I'm imagining just like the gaggle just en masse, just like going from one Aaron to the other, just sticking the microphone in the face. Other Aaron said this. How do you respond? So other Aaron Boone, then walked back what he had said he may have overstated the situation with his initial comment. He said, is he going to come back and be a 70-80 arm? I don't know that I'm expecting that necessarily, but when we get him back out there, I would expect him to be able to handle it. So, okay, that's one little managerial misstep in the press. Okay. The other involves Craig Counsell of the Cubs, embroiled in scandal because he seems to have been caught in a falsehood because he was asked, I believe, by the Chicago Tribune about his former team, the Brewers, and their 14-game winning streak, now division rival of Counsell's Cubs. And he was asked about whether he could appreciate the winning streak, something along those lines. Okay. And Counsell said, what's so great about it? I mean, they're playing good. They're playing great. They haven't lost since we played them. And the real sin is that he played dumb when it came to the George Webb burger giveaway. Oh. And he maintained that even though he's from the Milwaukee area, grew up in that area, he said that he said, I've never seen a George Webb. He's never set foot in one. Like the
restaurant?
Yeah. He's just...
Isn't it a chain?
Yeah. And he said he preferred Kops, which I've never seen a Kops. That's Kopps. And that is, I'm telling the truth. I assume that is another Midwest burger chain. I'm just not familiar. Sorry. But you won't find a quote of me contradicting this. I guess it's Kops frozen custard, I guess.
Oh,
I guess
okay. Yeah, and they serve burgers because it's the Midwest, so you got to have meat available on the menu, regardless of what it is.
So he's partial to Kops. He said he was not in line for a burger at George Webb in 1987 in a previous burger giveaway, just basically professed ignorance and indifference to this whole thing. Okay.
Can I ask it? Can I ask a clarifying question? I don't know if it's obvious from the reporting. Did he offer the last burger?
I doubt it. Because
so this was, it would be hard you were just clarifying, or the reporter was just clarifying when the last one was.
It'd probably be hard to maintain your ignorance if you knew that off the cup.
I was going to say off the cup.
Off the Kops. Yeah. So,
there you go.
So then fans, I believe, unearthed receipts.
Of course.
Pointing to Craig Counsell's former familiarity with George Webb. And it turns out that he knew all about George Webb, and he is now maintaining that he did not, because I guess he's sort of salty about this now. And, it's a division rival, and it's his former team. But people found evidence that in 2018, he had commented on this. Nothing's ever gone on the internet. And, he had to know that people would probably dig this up. And he knows George Webb well. He is very familiar, in fact, with this. So here's a tweet. This is actually by a Fox News 11 reporter named David Go, who did the legwork here. I think he was quote tweeting someone else, I think, who had unearthed this just for greater visibility, basically. But yes, he had said, so this is back in 2018 when the Brewers had 12 straight victories back then and got them free burgers back then.
Yeah.
And Counsell said at the time, who knew that we would make it this far? And the biggest piece of stress going into this game would be George Webb's hamburgers. The story continued at the time, Counsell knows the promotion well. His dad worked in the Brewers front office during the 1980s, and Counsell was in the stands for the Brewers' famous Easter Sunday comeback in 87, which gave them 12 straight victories to begin the season and sealed free hamburgers for the populace. Quote, I remember the concept of free hamburgers going back so long, it's hard to believe that it's never happened since then, Counsell said. I guess it's a pretty good streak, but it's something for everybody to talk about for sure. And I mean, free hamburgers is free hamburgers. I know you all will be there. So he knew all about the Webb burgers. And now it's just the cover-up is worse than the crime. There are stories. There's Sports Illustrated tweeting, Craig Counsell's comment fell apart under scrutiny. He's been caught lying. It's Burgergate.
Burgergate?
No one else called it that as far as I'm aware, but I know that you think we make too many things gates.
We do.
But this qualifies because this tarnishes his reputation, I gotta say.
Yeah, but the restaurant isn't called Burgergate.
No, it's not.
Watergate's a real place. You can stay there now, or maybe you can't. I think it's apartments now. Maybe it got converted into condos. Probably its own scandal. So obviously, like the more important quote unquote controversy here, and I hesitate to even call it a controversy. It's more of a dust up, is probably the errands, the various Boones and judges, because it suggests that there is potentially a lack of communication in the clubhouse in a way that is relevant to a playoff team, right? And the best player on a playoff team. And so in that respect, like it has the potential for the greatest on-field impact. But Counsell's thing is funnier, for sure. Man, what truly the promo that keeps on giving, right? It gives you, if you're lucky and in the greater Milwaukee area, a free burger, which if you like burgers, that's great. To get one for free, love that. And then also easily the dumbest controversy I've heard in a while. It's a weird lie, On the one hand, again, a very unimportant lie when it really comes down to it. He's not lying about something that is in the national interest. He's lying about burgers. That's weird. But that's a weird thing to lie about, especially because you have to know, one, that you should just have a passing familiarity with this if you're Craig Counsell and your history with the team is what it is. Not only in terms of your own managerial career, but your father's affiliation with the club also. So people are just going to assume that you know what this is. There's no shame in knowing. People are so proud of that. People love that promotion, man. People were chanting about burgers on that broadcast. They were doing. Is there a special separate promotion that you unlock if you extend? Because they met that streak and then they kept winning.
Surpassed it. Yeah.
Do you get a free custard or something? I do miss we have Culver's here, and I haven't eaten at it because it feels weird to eat at a Culver's outside the Midwest. It feels like I'm betraying something. The people of Madison are gonna get a chill and not know why. Yeah. Man, where it wasn't 116 degrees? Madison. Did get muggy though. Could get very muggy in the summer, Madison. Anyway, it's a dumb controversy. It's a dumb thing to lie about. Of course, Craig, of course they're going to track this down. They're going to run it down, buddy.
There is an out here where he could maybe claim that this wasn't an out-and-out lie because, I'm looking at the Chicago Tribune piece that started this all. And it says, Counsell didn't recall getting a free burger in 87 when I asked him about his childhood memories. In truth, he said he was more a fan of the burgers from Kopp's Frozen Custard, another Wisconsin staple. Quote, honestly, I've never seen a George Webb, Counsell said, referring to the restaurant, not the person.
Now, the person was dead by then.
Yes, right. But
I mean, George Webb had passed by the time.
Long gone. Yes.
Yeah. But
Yes.
his son had a sense of honor, I guess, and decided to do
the claim
promo.
in the original article as written is that he's never seen a George Webb.
Gotcha.
Not that he was entirely ignorant of the existence of George Webb or the streak. However, I will just throw this out there to our Wisconsin residents, how plausible this is, that he's never seen. It's not even I've never set foot in one.
Right.
And plus, how does he know that he prefers that he's more of a fan of the burgers from Cops if he's never been in a George Webb and tried their burgers? I mean, I guess he could be more of a fan of something without even having tried George Webb's. I guess that's possible too. But I don't know. This doesn't really pass the sniff test. There's a local radio host, Bart Winkler, who also sort of surfaced these earlier quotes and said, this is such a lie from Counsell, but it's such a minor lie, but it's still a lie he felt like he had to make because when you are a lying liar who lies, you are compelled to lie about everything. What a dork. That seems strong.
That's a lot. But that seems like a lot. I think everyone needs to just like take
being ground there, perhaps. But,
a breath.
But someone else who he was quote tweeting, I assume a local, said, why would Craig Counsell lie about never seeing a George Webb's in person? That's factually not possible living in Wisconsin as long as he has. I can't judge that, but I believe there are upwards of 20 George Webb restaurants, all located in Wisconsin and mostly in the Milwaukee area. So it does seem to strain credulity, really, that he could never have seen a George Webb, even from afar. So it does smack of some saltiness here. And to be fair, I guess, what is he supposed to say about the fact that the Brewers were just running away with the division when he was asked about this? I mean, you know, what's your reaction, manager of the division rival Cubs and former manager of the Brewers, to them beating up on the Cubs and opening up a large division lead? Yeah, what's he supposed to say? Like, so happy for the guys over there, you know, like it's still have some friends in the organization. It's a thrill to see them winning so much, you know. So to say what's so great about it, I mean, okay, that sounds a little sour grapesy. Like it's pretty great to win 14 games in a row.
That's a pretty petulant
but also the question, you know, what is he exactly supposed to express there? I guess other than some platitude about how well they've been playing. So anyway, those are the two minor managerial controversies. You're right. The Aaron Boone one is probably much more significant if it speaks to some sort of actual miscommunication between the team's manager and the most important player, which everyone who loathes Aaron Boone, which is every Yankee fan, as far as I can tell, quickly seized on this as an example of organizational dysfunction and Boone not knowing what he's doing. And who knows, maybe that was blown out of proportion too. It's not ideal, obviously, when your captain and your superstar and your highest paid and best player contradicts something that you said publicly and also does it in a way that questions why you said it. You know, it suggests that perhaps there's some tension under that situation, because there would have been a more diplomatic way for Judge to express that. And he's not normally someone who's going to call people out or be very quotable. So yeah, that speaks to perhaps not being on the same page or some discord even. Probably more important than whether Craig Counsell has seen a George Webb or not.
Yeah. And again, we're not trying to like overstate the case here or anything like that, but it is a little surprising. It's just interesting when folks decide, like, I'm going to smooth the way for my manager here and then address this with him later, and when they opt not to do that. And I can understand Yankees fans seizing on it, not only because of their sort of base disdain seemingly for Boone, but also just because he so rarely says really anything at all, you know?
Yeah.
And so for him to elect to do it suggests like a frustration or, you know, some sort of schism, but it also might just suggest that like he's tired, you know, you don't know. I don't want to, I don't want to make more of it than the situation merits, but it would make me perk up a little bit if I were a fan of the team and be like, wonder what's going on there, you know?
Mm-hmm. I love them on the Brewers subreddit, and they're scrutinizing the Counsell comments, and someone's saying, when he was in high school, there was one on Oakland near Kensington, right on the edge of Whitefish Bay and Shorewood. So I find it unlikely that he never saw that one. And they're going through like where the George Webb locations were when Counsell was playing in the area in high school, when his dad worked for the Brewers, when he was a player for the Brewers, when he managed the Brewers, when the Brewers earned free burgers during his tenure. It seems that it's striking most Milwaukee people as implausible.
I think that there should just be a lot more promotions where people get free food. You know, I think that I think that's great. You know, people were going bonkers for that promotion. They were really quite excited. And, you know, like, it's the perfect thing because you're already stoked. Your team is doing so well. You've won so many games that you, a person who had nothing to do with it, get free stuff. You have to really be good if that's the case, you know? And so I get people being like really amped about it. But people were really amped about it, Ben. They were like, whoa, amped.
People on the subreddit are saying that in the 80s and 90s, there were more than 50 George Webb locations. So it would have been even harder. I guess there's been some change in the fortunes, perhaps, of George Webb, some consolidation, some contraction. Right. So it would have been even harder to avoid seeing one when he was in high school in the area. Anyway.
Well, maybe they were not falling on hard times. Maybe they were like over franchised. You know, sometimes you get a little ahead of yourself. And maybe that's what happened, you know?
Yeah, although they can have been ubiquitous if Craig Counsell never saw one.
That's true. It's a real dumb conundrum, I'll tell you what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We need someone now to place Craig Counsell at George Webb, or with a George Webb in his sightline.
Right.
Maybe some
or like
B-roll
holding a burger
will surface
that
somehow.
Has, like a discernible rapper.
Like, he's like the Hamburglar or something, just like disposing of the evidence. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to other public comments made by people in baseball. After we talked about the Ketel Marte controversy last time, he did speak through an interpreter, and he apologized specifically for missing some games after the All-Star break. And Torey Lovello talked about it and praised him for taking ownership of this mistake. And perhaps now the Diamondbacks will put this behind them. But through his interpreter, Marte said, initially, the intent was to come back on Thursday and be with his team in practice. He wants to publicly apologize for not backing that up. I mean, he obviously knew the circumstances of his situation. He got frustrated and was in a bad spot. He truly wants to apologize for his teammates and everybody else, and said that his teammates still back him and have faith in him, and also went on to say he's had injuries in the past, and that is a plan that is being integrated within the coaching staff and himself in order to keep him on the field. It's intended to be for recovery. In those days off, he does everything that he needs to do in order to get himself back on the field and help the team win. So he acknowledged it publicly, and maybe now that this dirty laundry has been aired, teammates will be mollified and everyone will move on. Perhaps that's that. But it did strike me. So, you know, this is to just kind of go AWOL even for a few days. It's certainly out of the norm in baseball. They put him on the restricted list for a couple games, and the Diamondbacks won all 3 of the games that he missed, but I don't know that placates people, because it's the thought that counts, or the lack of thought that counts. And even though he had been burgled, it's just not something you can do in baseball without some opprobrium to just kind of take some personal time. But it is one of the many weird things about baseball that you can't take any time off during the season without being pilloried. And I understand why that is, and there are valid reasons for that. But basically, he's being criticized here for just like taking a couple personal days, essentially. Right. And granted, it doesn't seem like he did a good job of communicating that either. Right. But nonetheless, in most professions, this would mean nothing. This would be,
right.
okay, I'm taking a couple days. Like you get a certain number of days. Now, baseball is different for any number of reasons. For one thing, you get a large chunk of the year off. Like there's an off season and it lasts for several months. And granted, you still have to train and work out and do things to prepare for the season. It's not like complete leisure, but you are largely left to your own devices. Plus, you make a lot of money, and it's a very desirable job, and many people want to do it. And so, yes, you have to actually show up and be there. But it is a strange thing because as a baseball player, you're not getting a break, really, for months on end. That's where the idea of the grind comes from. You get the All-Star break, which is all of, 3 days? And you don't even get that if you're an All-Star, as Marte was. You're still traveling. You're still in uniform for at least one event there. So it's just a little blip in a season in which otherwise you are working commonly 6 days a week, if not 7 days a week, for several months on end, which even though you do get several months then to decompress and recover from that experience, it's still a lot, right? So it's just a very odd thing. And until recently, you couldn't even take time off for important life events without people criticizing you, maybe even teammates sniping about it, but certainly media members taking you to task for that. And even now, essentially the only reason that you are excused is for a birth or a death. Like if someone very close to you dies or someone very close to you is born, if you have a kid, then it's acceptable to take a couple days, maybe.
And it's not even that much time.
No.
I mean, like the paternity leave, you're looking at a couple of days. You're looking at a couple of days. Basically, like as long as I imagine someone with the financial resources of a professional athlete's partner is able to be in the hospital is about how long you get off, That's wild. And they have other help, presumably. I think that,
they could certainly afford it. Yeah.
Right. As folks who are in a position of financial privilege, they are better able to weather that. But I don't have any children, but I know plenty of people who have been immediately postpartum. And boy, would that not be enough as far as I was concerned in that moment. Like to get home with a brand new baby and then your husband has to sometimes they're not even home. They're like, not that they're not home on leave. They're not home in the city you're in. They have to go back out on the road. Like, wow, that's wild.
So I'm not crying for baseball players here. They have it good in any number of ways. And Ketel Marte is making $14 million. He's worth more than that, but that's still a lot of money. And he gets plenty of time to himself later in the year. But it is an odd thing that it becomes such an issue if you essentially take a day off at the wrong time or just a couple days off and suddenly it's like public reports and unrest in the clubhouse and have to issue a public apology for something that in basically any line of work you'd just be like, I'm going to take a couple days and that would everyone would be like, okay, sure, you're entitled to a few weeks or whatever you want. So that is well within bounds. No one would have anything negative to say about that probably unless, I don't know. I guess people could still be upset if you're like doing a group project or something and you disappear on the day it's due or whatever, right? Like people could still be upset about that. But this is just professional athletes. They're different than we are. It is a weird and wonderful lifestyle in a lot of ways, but also one where you're just constantly under the microscope and there's no letting up. The only way that you get a day off is like if you suck so bad that they bench you, basically. Other than that, you're going to be working every day.
Yeah, it's a profoundly strange occupation. And I think these guys go into it eyes wide open. It obviously comes with tremendous benefits, both in terms of like getting to do a thing you love, in terms of making a bunch of money. And you do get an off season, even though, guys, to your point, are expected to like stay in shape and often have developmental goals that they have to reach while they're not in season. But it's a wonderful job. And also it is profoundly strange. It is just profoundly strange. And I do think that having an appreciation for that, it doesn't mean that you have to like excuse a guy going AWOL or anything. And the people who are complaining in this instance were people within his own clubhouse. These are other people who have to adhere to these same professional standards. But I do think that like as outsiders to a clubhouse, it is a useful thing to like keep in mind as we're trying to understand like how do you get to a place where something like that happens, and the strangeness of it I think is useful to that. And so
yeah. If we had to, we should probably rank just the strangest things about being a professional baseball player or a big leaguer, just in
family
terms
at work.
of
Family at work with a bullet.
I don't know. No, because as weird as that gets sometimes, as honest the Drake LaRoche situation is, people have, bring a kid to work day or whatever.
That's not even what I mean. What I mean. Okay. You're a big leaguer. Congratulations, Ben. Let's pretend for a second you're a starting pitcher. You're Nolan McLean on the Mets, right? And you're getting called up and you're going to make your big league debut, and you are having one of the most stressful days of your life. Exciting, thrilling. Per the broadcast, got to eat Wagyu steak like several times in a 24-hour period, but he had weird poops, but that's none of my business. Wonderful, but also incredibly stressful. And then your mom is there. And not only is your mom there, not only is your dad there, who your mom says on television isn't a very emotional guy. There is a reporter up in the stands talking to them while they are watching you do your most stressful day. Bizarre. Absolutely not. The idea of my mom observing me on the day of the trade deadline fills me with horror. I need to be able to be the weirdest gremlin alive. I cannot be held accountable for the things I say on deadline day. I am so grateful that no one is watching me reacting to the things I appreciate, and I'm grateful to work with every single one of my coworkers. And also like on those high stress days, like you say things to the computer and you're like, no one can hear it. So it didn't happen. It's like, it didn't happen. It's like, it didn't happen. No. What if your mom was in the corner and someone was asking you about how you were doing? No, absolutely not. Family members at work. Easily the weirdest thing they have to deal with.
Getting booed and cheered publicly for your performance.
Very strange,
bad or good.
too.
Very odd. Yeah,
I know there's why your mom being there is so weird.
Yes, I know there's a stereotype which is probably about as accurate as most generational stereotypes, which is to say not very, about Gen Z and Gen Alpha and just how reliant they are on parents, right? And kind of integrating parents into schooling and work. And maybe it's not coming from them so much as it's coming from the parents and the helicopter parenting and all of that, right? I don't know how accurate all of this is, but the idea basically that parents are doing things for kids, or kids are expecting parents to do things for them.
I feel like they said that about us too, though. I feel like they
definitely said that about
millennials.
When it comes to like living at home, absolutely. Yes. And, probably because it's all sort of on a sliding scale and each generation makes the same complaints about the previous generation, which doesn't always invalidate them. Maybe there is actual progression or whatever changes from one generation to another. But yeah, it's always the youngs are soft and they are self-reliant, and we had it harder back in our day, right? And yeah, they definitely said that about living at home, and also just about being monitored at all times as opposed to just roaming free about the neighborhood, just the idyllic sandlot existence, just biking about unmonitored, parents never knowing where you were or what you were doing, the kind of 80s E.T. Stranger Things sort of existence, right? So yeah, what with all the stranger danger and the fears about kidnapping and such, that was kind of
they were afraid of that clown.
Well, yeah, they were with good reason. I was also.
I think they were afraid of that clown.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm just saying, maybe it'll seem less strange eventually to some generation to have your parents be at this big moment and weighing in on this big moment, but it definitely does seem daunting to me. I didn't even really want my mom to show up when I was playing as a kid in grade school in games.
Yeah.
I mean, she did sometimes, but, and you know, on some level, I guess I appreciated that she wanted to.
Sure.
But still, like, she had to sort of observe surreptitiously because I would get self-conscious, like if my mom's standing there, you know, which probably one of the many reasons I'm not cut out to be a professional athlete. Like, they probably just tune this stuff out and, you know, maybe not so much on the day of their big league debut, but generally they've had their parents in the stands for decades by that point.
Right.
They've been following them and taking them to travel ball and whatever else, right? So they're used to it, but it certainly sounds strange to us.
Yeah, I think that would be weird. I think that the clubhouse sounds like a place of great camaraderie and also just like a bunch of social rules that I would find very strange having to observe at work. And our presence, not you and I specifically, but like the media's presence in that space, you know, perhaps chief among them, right?
Everyone knowing your job performance to just an incredible degree with StatCast and everything, just knowing everything about what you're doing, knowing exactly how much money you make. And maybe the weirdest part is just kind of not controlling your own destiny in terms of where you work. Like if you're drafted, okay, well, I guess that's where I'm going to go now for however many years. Like, your fate is just not in your hands, and then you can just be traded at any time, at least for many years. And so at any moment you might be uprooted. That's probably the weirdest part. Like, not even just being banished from your job, but to an entirely different city, perhaps even a different country.
Yeah. People knowing about injuries, I would find very, very strange. And like, you know, you think about my elbow, my knee, my shoulder. Noah Syndergaard had hand, foot, and mouth disease. I know that about him. That's weird. He and I have never met.
I know so much about Noah Syndergaard, some of which I'd rather not know.
I'd rather not know. Or like, you know, the various, let's say, lower half injuries that Mitch Haniger endured in his career. Yes. Weird for me to know that about him. Don't know that man. We don't exchange cards at the holidays. Like, it's just, it's a bizarre thing. You have to do your job in the presence so much of the time these days, not only of your parents, but also potentially a DJ, you know? What's up with that? This is me reviving my DJ rant. What's with all the DJs? Why are there so many? Why are they everywhere? Why when I go to a Diamondbacks game, do I have to deal with a different DJ? And you know, it's not always the same one. And I want the DJs, if they're listening, to know it's not that I take issue with any one of your individual performances relative to each other. I think you're all
profession
bad.
Collectively.
Right. Like, why are you there? Why? There's an organist. Why am I listening? I feel bad because the only one of them whose name I'm able to remember is DJ Rockweiler. And I don't think that DJ Rockweiler is any better or worse than any of the other DJs. This is the point I'm making. It's not, it's just that his name is DJ Rockweiler, Ben. Like Rockweiler. Like Rottweiler, but rock. Except that he's a DJ. He's not playing rock music. He's playing music with a house beat over it and then expecting me to be happy about it. No.
Okay. Write in and let us know any overlooked aspects of being a baseball player that you think are strange.
I'm sorry to the DJs who listen to our show.
It doesn't sound like you're that sorry, but
I'm not, because I'm right, but I feel bad when I make someone feel bad, even if I'm right.
Yeah,
and I am.
They should feel bad for their choices in life that led them to being DJs, is what you're suggesting. But
no,
you don't necessarily want them to suffer for that.
Right. I mean, I guess on some level I do, because I'd prefer their unemployment to having to listen to them. So on that level, I am being profoundly unsympathetic to their plight. Here, let me salvage my own reputation here. I would just say that I know that the greater Phoenix metro area is home to so many places where DJs can DJ, and their DJing is welcome. Their DJing is celebrated. Their DJing is the reason you go to that place as one of the people who goes there. And so I would simply hope that your employment prospects can shift to one of those places,
right?
And not Chase Field, because
DJs have a constituency. They are valued by some subsection of the populace that is looking for a DJ.
100%.
So they should gravitate towards their audience.
Go find them. Go find those people. They love you so much, and they want to be there and say,
want you to drop the beat.
Right. They want you to drop the beat. In fact, they are right at this moment aching for the beat. They are waiting.
They depend on you to drop the beat.
Right. Because otherwise they can't dance. Right. They need you to dance. I don't need you to watch baseball. In fact, you are an impediment to my ability to do so. So, go find your people. It's not me.
Here's another impediment to our ability to watch baseball, the zombie runner, which often curtails contests that I am quite enjoying. And there was one on Tuesday. I go back and forth on what I think is the worst sin, the worst evil visited on us by the zombie runner, the worst way for a game to end because of the zombie runner. But this was up there. So we had
Mariners lost again.
Well, that wasn't the one that I was thinking of. But we had a pitcher's duel between two of the best pitchers in baseball and two of the best teams in baseball. We had Tarek Skubal versus Hunter Brown.
Yes.
Tigers versus Astros.
Yes.
And they delivered. They weren't at their best, exactly at their most dominant, but they put up zeros for several innings each. And the relievers who followed them put up zeros after that, and the game was scoreless through regulation, through 9 innings. So great. This is exactly as ordered. And, Skubal, he almost allowed a run. There was a runner thrown out at home to preserve the scoreless game. And Brown, I think there was a leadoff triple that he worked around and he stranded that guy. But great. That makes it even more exciting that they were kind of, on the tightrope wire, that they were close to allowing runs and then they escaped those jams and they were bailed out. And then we get to the 10th and the zombie runner just Kool-Aid mans through the wall and says, hey, you're enjoying this scoreless pitcher's duel between two first-place teams in which neither team has managed to scratch out a run and push one across. Well, what if we just suddenly started the inning with a runner on second base for no reason? What if we did that? Then maybe we could just give somebody a run without them having really earned it. Right. And so it ends up being a 1-0 game. Tigers 1, Astros 0. Works out for Meg and Meg's Mariners, but nonetheless.
Not they could take advantage of it because they can't
score
for another runner scoring.
But this is what happens. Caleb Ort comes in pitching for Houston, and he's not good. There was a cloud above him, an Oort cloud. That's an astronomy joke. But he comes in, bottom of the 10th. Wenzel Perez starts on second base for the Tigers. He is the zombie runner. Andy Ibanez flies out. Then there was an intentional walk to Dylan Dingler. Javi Baez struck out swinging. Dingler advanced to second on defensive indifference.
Yes.
Then there was another walk, and then the bases were loaded, and Ort walked in a run. A run was driven in by a walk. A run was plated. There was an RBBI, as one of our listeners suggested, a run base unballed in, I don't know. Anyway, that's how this ends. Now, it's not the worst possible ending, because I think the worst possible would be a 1-0 game where it's an exciting pitcher's duel, and then the run scores through no fault of the pitcher. That's the worst, when there's just runner on second who gets moved over to third on and out, and then there's just a sac fly or something, or, like the pitcher does nothing but get outs, but the run scores anyway. And there have been several of those games, many of those games over the years that we have been plagued by the zombie runner. I think we ran a stat blast on that at some point and got the tally. So this isn't quite that bad, because at least it was partly due to Caleb Ort's poor pitching and/or the Tigers' selectivity and drawing those walks. So it wasn't like a no-fault loss, but still, they had both held the line through these heroic defensive efforts through 9 innings.
Yeah.
And then the tie is broken and it's all spoiled because runner starts in extra innings.
Yeah.
This is, I think, the worst case scenario for me, aside from it's a sac fly or run scores on an out scenario. The other one that I hate is when it's a low-scoring pitcher's duel through 9, and then suddenly, like, the game is completely broken open. At least this was 1-0, which I guess makes it more palatable, or I don't know, maybe it makes it worse in some ways. But sometimes you have, like, the scoreless game, or it's 1-1 or something, and then the final score is, like, 8-6 or so, because it's just like both teams exploded with the zombie runner in the 10th, and it just distorts the picture of what that game was like to watch.
Right.
But this is up there, I think, when it comes to just, I want you to have to earn it when you have both done such a good job of preventing runs to that point. You really should have to legitimately earn one to win.
So I agree with that, right? I think that you should have to. I'm not here to say that the zombie runner is good. The zombie runner is bad. Very, very bad. Very bad. Don't care for it at all. Having said that and meaning it with such conviction, I was less bothered by this one. Now, is some of that the result of the game going in a way that I found useful?
Yeah.
To me personally, I'd be lying if I said it didn't matter, right? Of course, that was part of my calculus. But I also think that there is something so dramatic about the walk-off walk that you are able to forget some of the sizzle being taken out by there being a guy on second base already. So that would be maybe all I would say. And or didn't have it. And so some of you could say, and you wouldn't be wrong, that the guy starting on second certainly helped the cause of the Tigers. Obviously it did. But I felt like the dramatic tension of, is he going to be able to find the zone? Is Javier Baez going to be able to lay off? The answer to that was no. That part of it was very thrilling, and I think infused the whole proceeding with more tension. And so I take the broader point, and I would have loved for them to have just been like, hey, we're going to play baseball like we always have, and like most people find satisfying. But I was admittedly a little less bothered by this one than I typically find myself feeling when the zombie runner comes out and we're doing zombie runner type business. So I would just say that, and your mileage on that may vary. So that'd be fine if it did.
Okay. Yeah. Is there even dramatic tension when the question is, will Javi Baez lay off?
Well, earlier in this season, sometimes he was.
There was a time when he was. Yeah, it's
sometimes
true.
Sometimes he was, and it's been less true as the season has gone on, but it hasn't been it's happened some. So there you go.
Anyway, it was Gleyber Torres who drew the fateful walk. To end it. But yeah, it's just a letdown for me to have that happen. Anyway,
it's a fair complaint to register. To be clear, like I don't disagree with the broader argument, which is this is an abomination that we should get rid of. We are aligned in that respect. But this one did kind of, you make a bland dish, but then you put chili crisp on it, and it's like I do like that chili crisp. It makes it spicy. It imbues it with something more than just the blandness. So there you go.
All right. Last bit of business. I have a new baseball show to tell you about.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah. And a somewhat surprising one. Alien Earth is a baseball show.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am so excited because I was going to ask you about Alien Earth, which I have not started. Is it too scary for me, Ben?
Maybe.
How? Okay. Sorry, I want to hear about how it's a baseball show. But first we have to set a baseline that is about me selfishly. So, okay, I love the Alien movies. Ripley, feminist icon, very important to my development as like a human being in a way that we don't need to think about too hard. But I was able to deal with Prometheus, which has some gnarly bits. And so does the original Alien and Aliens, there's something about practical effects that I have an easier time with, oddly, even though it's like they are more real, but they're not. I don't know. I can deal with the practical effects stuff a little bit easier than like a lot of CGI'd horror, like the gore, like the super gore. But then my sister, who knows me very well, was like, Covenant is not going to be for you. And I did not watch it. And my understanding was that was quite arresting in terms of the violence. So like on a scale of the original 2 movies to Prometheus to Covenant, where does it fall in the gore continuum?
I think if you could make it through the original, you could make it through this. It's similar. It's very much modeled on the original Alien, sort of the same.
We got things bursting out of various organic material.
Plenty of body horror. There's not just one species of alien. There are multiple species of alien, and they're all gross in their own special way. So you do
I'm going to watch the pilot.
Yeah, it's a good show. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, people seem to be really liking it.
Yeah, and I have a pretty high tolerance for gore. Gore doesn't bother me, but I don't have the highest tolerance for horror necessarily. And I'm making it through this. I'm enjoying it. So yeah, I would recommend it. I've seen 3 episodes. There have been 3 episodes that have aired. This is on FX, Hulu, etc. Anyway, it is very much a baseball show, not just by the Effectively Wild definition. I guess it's not quite a Gilded Age level baseball show in that there's no actual baseball in real time being played, but there's a pretty prominent part for baseball in each of the first 2 episodes, certainly. The third episode, I would say, qualifies as a baseball episode barely, based on just one line of dialogue where someone likens something to a ball that got hit over the fence into the neighbor's yard and says, I'm the neighbor, so the ship belongs to me now. That's clearly an allusion to baseball, right? That's sort of a Sandlot situation. But that would be a borderline case if that were Alien Earth's sole claim to being a baseball show. But the first 2 episodes leave no doubt, because one of the prominent characters is a big baseball fan. Now, this is set in the year 2120, so good news, baseball is still around. And not just baseball, but baseball on the radio. I mean, maybe he's listening to an app. I don't know. It's kind of that retro-futuristic aesthetic of the original Alien, where everything is blocky and chunky and analog-like, which I just wrote about for The Ringer. So it's got that same sort of design. But this guy's walking around the city listening to a baseball broadcast in real time. So that's in the first episode, I think, maybe even the scene where we're introduced to him. So it's sort of a foundational aspect of his character. He's a baseball fan. Then in the second episode, these aren't important spoilers. It's just the baseball stuff. So in the second episode, he finds himself in a rich person's apartment, and it turns out that this rich person has the ball that was hit by Reggie Jackson, the 3rd home run he hit in the 1977 World Series. And in fact, the episode title is Mr. October. And it's because of Reggie. So he just happens to see this ball. And of course, because he's a big baseball fan, he knows the significance of this. And you even see a clip of that baseball broadcast and the home run being hit and the call and all of it. So very much a baseball scene. Now, I appreciate this, as always. And, you know, it bolsters my case that baseball is really overrepresented in fiction and in popular media, just relative to its cultural footprint at this stage. And I don't know that Noah Hawley, who is the creator, showrunner, writer, sometimes director of this series, is a notable baseball fan. Perhaps he is, but I don't know him to be a big baseball fan. But he's of the demographic that you'd think he might be baseball curious, and also kind of came of age. You know, he's a 58-year-old white guy. Like, part of my theory is that we still see so much baseball in movies and TV because it's kind of an echo of how prominent baseball was 30 plus years ago, you know, late 80s, early 90s, when
I think there's something to that.
A rash of baseball movies. And so if you kind of came up and were into movies, it's just a lot of baseball. And so it becomes part of the cultural fabric. And, you know, it just still has a romance and significance to it, harkens back to a pastoral past that perhaps never quite existed the way that we romanticize it. But, there's just, you can sort of signify something when you put baseball in that does not necessarily get signified by football, maybe, even though football is far more popular. So what stands out to me, though, and I don't know if it rises to the level of a peeve, but it's something that is noteworthy, I think, is that in future fiction, in sci-fi, you often get allusions to contemporary culture that are kind of anachronistic if you really think about it. Like, would this guy in 2120 be such a big baseball fan that he would be aware of the Reggie Jackson home run and would instantly be able to assess the significance of this artifact? Because, that's 140 something years ago at this point in 2120. Like it's a lot to expect him to know. And granted, they had established that he was a baseball fan in the previous episode, so it's a little less far-fetched that he would just happen to know this, but still 143 years. I mean, think about 143 years ago to us today. How aware are people of the goings-on in 1882 in baseball, right? It's, I guess people still talk about Old Hoss Radbourne, and I mean, we talked about Jake Seymour, who was one of the Seymours, the last pitching Seymour on our very last episode. He pitched in 1882 and 1882 only. So I guess it comes up, but I wouldn't necessarily have the reverence for something or be able to just place the significance of something. I'm not Richard Hirschberger. I have a healthy knowledge and respect for baseball's past and distant past, but even so, and we're outliers even when it comes to baseball awareness. So you wouldn't think that it would just be something that people were that familiar with. And yet we constantly get allusions to 20th century culture in depictions of the far future for obvious reasons, I guess, because we are 20th or 21st century people watching these things. And so these references, if you just constantly had the characters sprinkle in references to things that supposedly happened hundreds of years after now, then we would not know what they were talking about. And it would be like watching something where people are constantly doing inside jokes and you feel excluded. But that's what it would be like, probably, because if you listen to people in conversation now, we're largely referring to things that are recent or that happened in our lifetime, not things that predated. And, I'm kind of an old head and I'm interested in culture that predated me. But even so, within limits, I mean, I did the whole Ella Black series on the Gilded Age and everything. But and hey, we watched the Gilded Age. I mean, that started in like 1882, 83 or whatever. So we have some passing familiarity with that period in history. But nonetheless, I think these shows, sci-fi over-indexes on culture that is familiar to us, the people who are watching, when it airs for obvious reasons, and yet sometimes almost breaks the immersion for me because it's like, would these people really be talking about this? How likely is that?
I think that you raise a good point, although I will offer two potential ways of soothing your disbelief. The first is maybe this just suggests the ongoing vitality of Sabre as an organization, that it is pulling forward. And I sound like I'm doing a joke, but like we do have it is a sport that puts so much emphasis on its historical tradition, right? Mm-hmm. And maintaining that and uncovering new aspects of it and preserving the ones that we already have. And so it isn't completely unbelievable to me that would be a persistent theme even into the far future, a far future dominated by like not only soulless, but like Machiavellian and quite cruel corporate interests, right?
Yes.
That seems reasonable to me. I also think that I wouldn't be surprised if the further into the film, like the TV and film era that you get, the better the preservation of those moments is going to be, because you can actually see them in a way that is like athletic, right? It's not just stills. It's not just necessarily like grainy black and white footage, but you're going to be able to like see the guys doing the thing in a way that is identifiable. And because the athleticism of pro baseball players is just getting better and better all the time, I suspect that like the gap between what we perceive as the modern game now and what we come to view as the modern game 100 years from now, it's not like there won't be a gap, but it'll be smaller than, at least from a pure athleticism perspective, than it was, us back to, Babe Ruth or whatever. And so that suggests to me that there might be a greater ability to like kind of get your arms around it and have it feel familiar and worth talking about and impressive, because it is like, no offense to early baseball, but it's like you look at the guys now and you look at the guys then, and like the step forward from a conditioning perspective and athleticism perspective is just so obvious, right? You think about average fastball velocity now, et cetera. So I do think that you're absolutely right, because the true audience for those moments isn't people in the future, it's people right now. And so you want to ground it in like sports and reference that still means something, especially when you're doing sci-fi for a more mainstream audience than people who are really into like genre fiction or whatever. Because like when you're doing genre fiction, we've talked about this, like the most intimidating notion to me about writing genre fiction is like having to make up nouns that sound real, right? Like all the florps, like, oh my God, the idea of having to construct a believable florp. Can't even imagine it, right?
Yeah, you'd be bad at the techno babble, the techno bubble, the techno bubba. To bring things back to
Bubba. I think you found the episode title. I just want to be clear, like, again, it's not a bad name, and I think it's a fine nickname, and I can totally imagine it being affectionate. There are all kinds of folks who have Bubba as a nickname. It just, to me, it feels like a baby's name. It feels like a baby, like, oh, hey, Bubba. Like you'd say it to like a baby in a crib being like, oh, Bubba, Maybe it's the way I say Bubba. Maybe this is probably a Meg problem. I want to own that right up front. But
you make an excellent point. Not necessarily about Bubba, but about the visuals, again, because the 20th century stuff is the earliest preserved on film, and so that might be more of a tangible connection to that era.
And you can see it at game speed.
Yeah, and could create some curiosity and fascination, because that's the earliest preserved history that you have footage of. So we can't watch baseball from 1882. And so that just makes it seem separate and different and inaccessible. It's not even like black and white with a weird frame rate. We just can't see it. And you have to imagine it in your mind's eye. Whereas, if you're in the year 2120 and you're watching something from 1977, at least it's right there on film. Right. It's real life. It's in color. So, yes, it is conceivable to me that would make it seem more real and would make that just help preserve the memory and awareness of that within reason. But this is a consistent thing, like in Star Trek, for instance. Right. So you have, Captain Picard is into the Dixon Hill fictional noir, sort of pulp stories, right? The detective stories. And then Tom Paris on Voyager.
That's right,
into Captain Proton, kind of the like early sci-fi sort of play on that kind of stuff. And then, and of course, Benjamin Sisko on Deep Space Nine is a big baseball fan, which is delightful. And Deep Space Nine is set in, I think, the 24th century. So again, maybe, it strains belief. But what I appreciate about that is that they did at least invent a fake baseball player, Buck Buckeye. Right. And so they have this fictional history of Buck Buckeye, who was like a 21st century player. So he's still pretty close to our time, but they at least extended it in kind of a future blast way. Like he plays for the London Kings, and, like they're projecting some growth in the game. And And he debuted, I think, canonically in baseball in 2015, which is in the past for us now, but was in the future for Deep Space Nine viewers who were watching Deep Space Nine when it was airing. And so there's this whole history of Bukbakai, which I appreciate that they did that at least. And he lived a long time. And I guess in Star Trek, there's just this fascination because there's the World War and there's all the upheaval from that. And maybe there's nostalgia for the 20th century, though there were plenty of world wars going on then and just all sorts of terrible stuff. But also, I don't know, it was and it was before First Contact. So maybe you look back fondly on this era when humanity was still alone in the universe as far as it knew for sure. So I can see reasons why in universe it might make sense. But the real reason is kind of an out of universe reason, which is that it just makes it more relatable to us if you have a Flash Gordon-esque Captain Proton guy who, someone on Voyager is obsessed with.
And as I was saying, if you live in a world with florps, or warp drive or, whatever, and you're trying to get that series to be interesting and palatable to people who might have an appreciation for the Alien movies, but aren't necessarily hardcore sci-fi fans, right? Those movies were popular beyond just the audience for genre fiction or whatever. I think having a recognizable cultural touchstone helps to smooth the way for those people. It doesn't end up being florps all the way down.
It humanizes it, it grounds it. Yeah.
Right. So I think that is also part of why there's a gravitation toward those kinds of cultural touchstones that is as much about letting the audience know hey, it's okay. You don't have to remember the date of first contact to enjoy this thing, right? Or whatever, and I like science fiction and I'm not trying to, give sci-fi a hard time, but sometimes you'll watch, there's there's mainstream sci-fi and then there's whatever they had on at 2 a.m. on the Sci-Fi Channel. And there's a gap between those in terms of the audience, and bridging that gap, I imagine, is important to FX. But I saw there was a quote from Noah Hawley about how he didn't like the Apple storification of the more recent.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, these are steady hands to have this franchise entrusted to, because I didn't like that either. It was why does it look so nice?
Yes, right. The Prometheus Covenant. Yeah. They're prequels, and it's why is the technology so advanced?
Better.
It kind of makes sense if you're in Star Trek and it's the mirror universe or it's the alternate timeline or parallel or it's the far future in Discovery or something. But then in Alien, canonically, it was confusing. But I do appreciate the effort to sort of shake things up, because I just wrote about how all these franchises that originated in the late 70s, early 80s, Star Wars, Alien, Blade Runner, etc., they're all kind of frozen in time with the technology that at the time seemed sort of futuristic, but now it's wait, how did we end up in this world where they have synthetics and cyborgs and yet also CRT screens and camcorders and just, stuff that seems low tech comparatively. And, it's a different universe. So that's fine, maybe. But, it's you're pressured to kind of stay within the archetype of those classics.
Right.
If you're in that same range of the timeline, the fictional timeline. So there are pluses and negatives to that. Anyway, baseball does kind of give you something to hold on to and makes it more recognizable and more relatable. And I'm always here for it. I'm in favor of it. Bring on the baseball shows. So we've got another good one, big baseball show, Alien Earth. Check it out.
Okay.
You can support Effectively Wild on Patreon by going to patreon.com/effectivelywild and signing up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Brandon Perocco, Seamus Cooper, Tom, Matt G, and Andrew Hartnett. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, prioritized email answers, personalized messages, autographed books, discounts on merch, and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes, if you're so inclined, to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and other podcast platforms. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild, and you can check the show notes at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. That will do it for today. Thanks as always for listening, and thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We'll be back with another episode soon. Talk to you then.
Romantic, pedantic, and hypothetical, semantic and frantic, real or theoretical. They give you the stats and they give you the news. It's a baseball podcast you should choose. Effectively Wild is here for you, about all the weird stuff that players do. Authentically strange and objectively styled. Let's play ball. It's effectively wild. It's effectively wild. It's effectively wild.